believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Rico, the friend also known as Rookie Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have my dear friend, activist, thinker, researcher, Colin McNamara. And we met through our mutual friend, Richard Grove. We would see each other at some of Richard's parties, and then we always got along, we always connected, and then we would also see each other at many little protests or rallies, which is one of the reasons I love Colin, because he's so proactive, he's outspoken, he's constantly looking for ways to get involved locally, which is something I think we should all be doing more of. So hopefully this conversation can also inspire many of us to also be more proactive and get more involved. Another great way of creating change or starting a ripple is supporting the content creators you love. We invest much of our personal time, our money, our energy into bringing something to the world of value. We're attempting to bring you thought-provoking conversations, or teach you something new, or maybe share some personal stories that can inspire you or you can connect with. And if you get some value out of these podcasts, this work, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial, like I always tell you guys. I know many of us are in tough financial times, and if that's the case, review, share the show, tell people about the show, upload the show, put it on any of the video platforms or social media platforms you might be on. Also, subscribe to us on all the audio and video platforms. We're also now on Substack. And if you're looking for other ways of supporting the show that aren't financial, just watch all my videos on Rockfin. It's a great YouTube alternative. It's a video platform with tons of free content. All my videos of the Ripple Effect podcast are there for free, and just by watching will help support the show. So please watch our videos on Rockfin. But if you can financially support the show, please consider sending a one-time donation on PayPal, supporting us monthly on Patreon. And I know I have tons of great listeners out there who are constantly sending me articles, research, suggesting guests. If you're one of those listeners and you want to have a conversation and share some of your knowledge on the show, join my Patreon page. For $1 a month, you can support the Ripple Effect podcast, and you can be a part of our once-a-month Patreon podcast, which is just a podcast I do with my Patreon supporters. They can connect with me. They can connect with other listeners. I know everyone listening can afford $1 a month. So please, if the majority of people listening and downloading these episodes donated as little as $1 a month, I could do this full time. So please consider joining my Patreon page. Other ways of supporting the show is checking out the University of Reason and the autonomy courses created by Richard Grove, who is our mutual friend, Colin, and mine's mutual friend. It's how I met Colin. Richard Grove is one of the smartest people I've ever met, and his autonomy courses and the University of Reason, the whole community has really helped a lot of people. So if you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking for a new career, if you're looking to learn something new, if you're looking to expand on some skills you already have, please check out the autonomy courses. Just by checking out the courses, you can help support the show. Somebody who did take those courses, another sponsor of the show, is Content Safe. Matt Raymer, the CEO and creator of Content Safe, is also a graduate of the University of Reason. And if you're a content creator, if you're a YouTuber, if you're a podcaster, and you're looking to expand your show and reach a bigger audience, check out Content Safe. What he does is he lets me upload to one of my video platform channels, and then it automatically syncs to all my other channels. So it saves me tons of uploading time. I don't have to upload the thumbnail, the show description, or anything more than once. I upload the video to one of my channels, and then it syncs to all my channels. So please check out Content Safe if you're a YouTuber, content creator, podcaster. Thanks to Content Safe, when I got kicked off YouTube, I had the peace of mind of knowing that people can find my videos on all these other platforms. And regardless who censors the Ripple Effect podcast, you'll always be able to find the video somewhere. He also built my website, and that's just a couple of the many services he offers. So definitely reach out, let him know you're a listener to Ripple Effect podcast, and he'll definitely hook you up. Other ways of supporting the show is checking out my music, the music you hear in the podcast, in the beginning and in the end, and in the middle from the intro to the actual conversation. It's called Theory 6. That's my solo project. It's a little older, but it's still available in all the places you can get music: iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, etc., all those places. So check out that if you like the theme song or if you just want to check out some of my old music. I also have a crypto wallet. If you want to send Ethereum or Bitcoin, you can find those addresses on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. I also have a merch store, and you can find all this stuff in the show description or on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. And on that merch store, you'll find hoodies, hats, t-shirts, mugs, a lot of this stuff you see me rocking during the podcast. So if you're watching the video version of these episodes, you'll find me wearing the Ripple Effect podcast t-shirts or hoodies or whatnot. If you like what I'm wearing, please check out therippleeffectpodcast.com, click on merch, or you can go directly to the merch store by going to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. Last but not least, Element Electrolytes, one of my favorite sponsors. As you guys know, I'm not a fan of sponsors, so all the sponsors I do have are people that I know, products that I like, and Element is one of those because Rob Wolf, the creator of Element Electrolytes, was on the podcast. We were talking about how I use this product. I'm a big fan of electrolytes because a lot of people like myself who do keto, they do fasting, they do paleo type of diets. It's hard to stay hydrated because you're eating less. A lot of times in these type of diets, you're minimizing your fruit intake or foods that have electrolytes or foods that have moisture that will help keep you hydrated. So a lot of times when you're dealing with headaches, muscle fatigue, just fatigue in general, muscle soreness or tightness, you might not think so, but a lot of those symptoms are coming from dehydration. And many of the hydration options out there are full of sugar, carbs, calories, and this isn't one of them. This is no sugar, and that doesn't mean that it's sweetened with that cheap artificial sweetener called sucralose, which they use in everything. This is actually sweetened with stevia, which comes from the stevia plant. A lot of times you see it listed as a stevia leaf. So it's a natural sweetener. The potassium, magnesium, and sodium in it are premium ingredients. It's not cheap versions of them. And this won't knock you out of fasting or ketosis. So Element Electrolytes is a great option to stay hydrated, add some flavor to your water, drink something that's healthy and good for you. And if you're dealing with any energy loss or any of those symptoms I mentioned before, this might help you out with that. Of course, also check out my other show, The Union of the Unwanted. It's a big Zoom conference call with thinkers, authors, researchers, and it's hosted by myself, Charlie Robinson, Midnight Mike, and Sam Tripoli. The audio is available everywhere. The video is live streamed on Rockfin every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and then it's eventually also available on Odyssey. And that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with my good friend Colin, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. First time on the show, so I have to go through the whole origin story on where you grew up, where you're from, anything else that you might want to share or might be interesting in your life journey, and let people know who you are.
I'm Colin McNamara. I'm calling in from Manchester, Connecticut, and I'm born and raised in this town. I spent some time outside, lived in Vermont for 5 years, but I'm back here raising my family. My wife and I have 4 kids together. And we're homeschooling, but I'm trying to get more involved politically and spreading awareness in town. And to those ends, I've been speaking out at local meetings pretty regularly. In terms of interesting things about me, I've hitchhiked across the country a couple times solo, and that was an experience. It definitely helped shape who I am in terms of being able to meet new people and talk to people from all persuasions. And That's where we're going now.
Yeah, well, one thing, we met via Richard Grove. That's actually how we met. Some people who listen to the show might know that Richard and I became friends because when he came on the show, we realized that he didn't live too far from me, and then we hooked up a few times. And you're always hanging out at Richard's house. We ended up even doing, I don't know if you remember, some years ago we did a podcast in his studio at his house. It was us two and a couple other friends of Richard, and you would also always be at all the same protests and activists. You know, being a activist. What led you to want to be? I mean, what was it? You're dressed up like Santa at one of the Brian Festas.
Yeah, they had like the vote to remove the religious exemption of vaccination for school-age children, and it was around. I think it was around Christmas time. But during COVID, I started pretending to be Santa because I have 4 kids and a bunch of other homeschooling families were like, "There's no Santa, so can we do something about this?" And that was just kind of a gag. I went to the Capitol dressed as Santa around Christmas just to bring some levity to the situation, and it's always good to have some fun with your activism.
Yeah, well, it was funny because everybody wanted to take a picture or go up to Santa and meet Santa, so it was hilarious. And
I was promoting you got to believe in your immune system, as opposed to a bunch of pharmaceutically derived liability-free products.
well, so we did meet. So how did you meet Richard? Did you guys meet when he came to Connecticut, and were you familiar with his work prior to that?
So I actually met Richard through my older brother, who at the time lived in town, and Rich was living in Manchester, and he needed some IT help with some computer issues he was having. And my brother had an in-home computer repair business, so they connected and became friends, and he'd hang out over there. And I remember, like, my older brother first introduced me to 9/11 Truth. I think he played the Pentagon Strike video for me, with like the Dust Brothers were the soundtrack. And he was like, "Oh, I have this other friend I know that is into this stuff." So he invited me over one time with him, and that's how me and Richard got connected. It's just serendipitous. And we've been friends for like almost 15 years, I think.
Were you guys similar in ideologies when you guys met, or because it seems like obviously, your thinking is very parallel with Richard in regards to very freedom-oriented, libertarian-oriented type of worldview. Is that something that you already kind of established when you met him, or was that something that came in?
Well, I knew that something was wrong, and I knew that the government wasn't maybe your best friend. But he's got such a vast body of work and has done so much deep dives into the research through his 9/11 Synchronicity podcast, followed up by Tragedy of Hope podcast. You can get an education that's rivals any sort of history education you're going to get at a public school or a college. So he's definitely informed a lot of my opinions. I did come to him with opinions that 9/11 was probably orchestrated by, not what the story was being told to us was accurate, but other people were behind it. So it's a mixed bag. But I mean, he does great work. He's doing awesome work with Grand Theft World, which I try to tune into every week.
I've called it Grand Theft Auto a few times also. It's hard not to.
That's what happens when you steal the font and the logo. You take the brand, and sometimes you mistake it.
Allegedly, he took the brand. Nobody sue him, please. But it's was Rich one of your big inspirations in regards to like your personal worldview, or is there certain books or researchers, any other like inspirations or anybody who influenced the way you think?
Well, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, Irish Italian, and like my grandfather, his uncle, was he grew up briefly in Ireland. He lived there for like 6 years. Actually, when he was older, he was born in America and went back. My grandfather, but his uncle was involved in like the Irish independence movement, and he was actually killed by the Black and Tans, which were like a strike force for the British. So it was always been like, maybe it's in my blood to be a little bit rebellious and to question the status quo and who's in charge. And I'm a second child, 3 brothers. I've always been outspoken and you have to assert yourself in that environment. And I've always kind of had a problem with authority, just seeing the hypocrisy of things growing up, in school. And, whether you get in trouble for doing a minor thing because you're a boy and a girl will let it slide. Or I went to Catholic school my whole life, so I had to always deal with like dress codes and just that kind of nonsense. In terms of worldview, like, I've always had a broad horizon where, like, I knew that America, even though we have this great country and there's so much freedoms, there's other things that in other cultures that we could maybe pick and choose that are maybe they do a little bit better than us. And I've always wanted to travel and explore, and that's what I did most of my early 20s, mid 20s.
You traveled the U.S. or to other countries?
I did a little bit in Europe, but mostly North America. So I did a couple hitchhiking trips, like I said, and a bunch of road trips and motorcycling trips. And they brought me from, Alaska and the Northwest Territories all the way into Mexico, the Western coast. And I wish I spent more time in South America. And I was planning on going to South America for a long time, at least a year. But that's what life happened, and my plans changed, and now I'm a father of 4.
Which is awesome, and it can lead us into the other discussions, because what issues as a parent and somebody who, like you said, you would go to these meetings, what issues were motivating you to go out there and be outspoken, and what issues today as a parent? Because it's funny, because my last guest, this guy Dustin Baker, who he owns a kind of a health and wellness company, and he's into like HGH and stuff, but his worldview, the way he look at things, is very similar to ours, and we talked probably a lot about this and other things. But what he's becoming a parent, and we talked about some of the issues that are concerning to him, and being a parent may become even more concerning. What issues as a parent are some of the issues that, because I think you being a parent, that's maybe you would also be just as involved as an activist, but as a parent, is there issues that are now more on getting your attention than maybe they would be if you weren't a parent?
Yeah, being a parent definitely changes the way you look at things. Now you got skin in the game, as they say. But the number one issue for me was the vaccinations in Connecticut, and that's what got me the most involved. My wife and I planned to homeschool our kids prior to all this nonsense, but it's a slippery slope, and we knew that once they try to take away the ability to say no to a vaccine as a child, they're going to eventually come for your adult ability to say no to a vaccine. And it's funny because I got involved in it, and I spoke with all of our reps and the senator to represent our district down at the Capitol, and I specifically said, like, this is just a chiseling away mechanism, and once they do this for children, it won't be long before they start doing this for adults. And they were, no, that would never happen, and that's not gonna fly. And then literally a few months later, COVID hit, and this whole unraveling has happened. And everything they said that wouldn't happen, that I was warning them that it would be a possibility, has come to fruition. And I see these people now, and they still stick to their guns. Like, the best thing for this all is vaccination, and it's disconcerting to say the least. But keep plugging away.
Yeah, the thing about the vaccine issue, and people like yourself who have been motivated by that topic for a while, when 2020 happened, the whole COVID lockdown, and I've said this on the show multiple times, where it seems like people who were already aware of the influence of Big Pharma and aware of what they were attempting to do in regards to kind of pushing, force-feeding vaccines to the public, like, it wasn't as surprising to us. It was much easier for us to cope with what was going on and understand that there was another agenda, and that Big Pharma could do what they've done, which is, force feed people a experimental vaccine that could and does harm some for the purpose of their own benefit. And it's do you think because you were already aware of all these issues, and you already have done some research on these issues, that you were already one step ahead of everybody else? Because I feel like in the alternative media community, like, there's a lot of people that didn't focus on that topic. You obviously had Dell and the High Wire who focused mostly on those type of topics. But outside of that, you know, it's like there wasn't a whole lot of shows that put a lot of emphasis on that. Like, and
Well, having like an awareness of these issues prior to COVID coming around was a huge blessing, because while a lot of people that I knew in my personal life were getting spun around and like terrified, I was able to keep my head cool. And if you could just go back in my Facebook history on March 20th, 2020, like a week after, I was just saying that this is mostly has to do with economics, and they're using it as a way to hide all this debt and all this money they've laundered or they've stolen, and this is a way to just blow it all up in front of everybody and get away with it while they promote these other agendas. And I wrote a post about this. It was pretty involved, and my best friend at the time's wife is a nurse, and she took exception to it, and it ended up boiling over into a little bit of an argument. And as a result, unfortunately, like, they've kind of just cut me out from that one instance of when the lockdown first got people really out of their mind, and they've never come back. And so it's definitely good to be aware of the issues, and was able to navigate it and tell people in my family what was going on as it was happening, or even a little bit before. That was fantastic. And not to be like, I told you so, but as things keep happening, it's like more people are asking questions, which is great. More people are coming around, which is great. But you just got to keep the pressure on, because the people that we're working against they have all the money, all the levers of power, and they don't sleep.
well, your meetings and some of the stuff that you would say at these meetings were it showed how well researched a lot of people who they will easily just call conspiracy theorists really is. I mean, I remember seeing one of your videos where you showed up and you talked about the vaccine insert, and how you open up a COVID vaccine insert and there was no ingredients, there's no information there's nothing there. And, you know, I'm like, I'm so glad he's doing this, because how many people have no idea that that's real? Like that, you know, I'm sure some people had such a hard time believing that that was real that they probably thought it was a fake insert. But, you know, it comes to show the average person that something that seems too crazy to believe, before you dismiss it, maybe you should do your own research and not just dismiss people as conspiracy theorists. And that's kind of like the good thing of 2020, like you said. One of the few good things that came out of it was people like, you know, like us, who would say things to the average person, and we would get these crazy looks like, wow, you're insane. Like, well, no, that's not really what's going on. Or no, that type of evil, that type of control, people who want to have that type of control over others, like that doesn't exist, or people wouldn't purposely harm others or whatever. They're much more open to those discussions now. Bill Gates not being a good person is something that the average person can digest much easier than prior to 2020. Prior to 2020, he did such a great job with just his image and being looked at as this person who's just trying to help people and save people. And now people are like, you know what? Maybe this guy who hung out with Jeffrey Epstein isn't a good person. Maybe there is something to it. And some of the stuff is just was super obvious. I mean, he would openly in one interview talk about how he wants to vaccinate the world and, you know, all this stuff. And then in another interview, or sometimes even the same conversation, he would talk about just how we needed the issues with the population growth, and how we need, even though it's going in the other direction now, which is possibly what they want in the first place. And, you know, with the Georgia Guidestones being in the news recently and all that stuff, it makes you, you know, kind of reminds us of this conspiracy theory, for lack of a better term, that of the elite wanting population to be at a certain number for whatever reason, for either control or whatnot. But
well, I don't actually bring those kind of topics up in my public comments too often. I try not to like bring in a bunch of conspiracy theory sounding things. What Ricky's talking about, when I go to speak, it's at the, you know, Manchester Town Hall, and I encourage everybody to go to the local town hall or their town council and find out when the meetings are, and, you know, read the agenda, get involved, and find out what's happening in town. I won't speak just about like the fact that they're having this out of control vaccine push, but just more local centric topics, or maybe the state. And I think if people spend more time focusing their attention on local stuff that's happening in front of them, they can have a greater influence, because they won't be talking about these national things that they don't have any influence in. So that's what I want to get across, is the most important thing for people to do. It's one thing to know all these things and be researched, and I've listened to dozens of podcasts and read tons of books and articles. That's great. But if you're just talking to your friends that you're mostly in agreement about the topic with, it's not going to really expose it's not the audience you really need to speak to. And when you go to these meetings, it's not necessarily you're speaking to the board of directors or the town council themselves, but it's a public comment, it's public forum, so you're getting it on the record. And from there, most of these meetings are not well attended, to believe it or not, and they're pretty dry. But if you get it on the record, and then you take a little legwork and you can clip it and you can put it on YouTube, it's going to get a lot more views and a lot more traction than it'll naturally in your town if people are just watching it live. I mean, I go to these meetings, I'm literally the only person in the building besides the people that have to be there, that are paid to be there. Some meetings. And I try to, like I said, stay locally focused. So I spoke even before COVID. I've been speaking for a while, but I spoke before COVID about the 5G rollout, and how, admittedly, our own senators, Blumenthal, are saying there's no safety studies on 5G. And the telecom industry is like agreeing, like, yeah, we haven't done any safety studies. So I started speaking out about that prior to COVID. And then once COVID came in, you can speak, you don't have to talk about Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein and this eugenic policy they have that's funded by all these different organizations around the world. You could just speak to, like, the mandates that your governor's instituting, or the fact that they're closing down small businesses that have like a 500 square foot footprint, while they let the 50,000 square foot Walmart with 350 people inside it function, as normal. And that's the real discrimination that's happening, like, daily, is they're squeezing the small people and the middle class as much as possible while empowering the corporations. So rather than say, like, this predator class, I'll just say, these corporations are colluding with state and federal government to create this legislation that's causing these problems, and that resonates more with people that are more normies, I'd say, which I would say is probably the majority of the population. So it's a great opportunity to use it to spread awareness and bring some levity to the meeting in general. Sometimes I kind of goof on them a bit. I started off as, like, concerned, and then during COVID, as I saw it kept going, and they started doing things to the kids and masking them and separating them, and everything was going remote. And I just, I would go to the playground in town here, and there'd be these kids that would be terrified of going near another child. And that's, like, the real world consequence of the actions the government's taken. So I'll go to the meeting and I'll explain how my kids are on the monkey bars, and a girl was, like, close at hand and was terrified, started screaming out loud. And her mom's like, she's just really afraid of COVID. And it's like, your daughter's like 3.5 years old. Like, how does she know to be really afraid of COVID unless, like, you're letting her listen to it all the time, and you're reinforcing it, like, stay away from kids, don't go near your kids. So when you go to these meetings, don't fly off the handle and start talking about Jeffrey Epstein and he didn't kill himself. You got to pace yourself.
Yeah, no, that's one good thing that you can do that maybe I wouldn't be as capable of doing, is, like, I think it is important, like you said, to kind of reach for lack of a better term, like, the normies. And the thing is, most of this stuff, when you're calm and collective and you go in there well researched and well thought out with what you have to say, it doesn't sound crazy, and that's kind of like the argument with Alex Jones, right? That it was always, he was right more than he was wrong, but because he was screaming and yelling and being over the top, he hurt the movement a little bit, or it ended up doing more harm than good, because people would look at a topic as a Alex Jones topic because he said it, instead of being like, no, there's actually some evidence that this is true or whatnot. And so it's like, anytime you can calmly talk about stuff, but it definitely seems like a lot of things that used to be conspiracy theory, like I was saying before, like, have now become topics that you can openly talk around normies, and it doesn't seem as insane, right? Like, do you get that feeling that like they're much more open to some of these what used to
Well,
be?
what's interesting is that I kind of feel like conspiracy theories at certain times could be used as like a slow drip of information to normalize the idea of it being a possibility, where a lot of people that hear it for the first time will dismiss it, but then as they hear it more, it won't be as outrageous, and then in a year or two it'll come out as the news is real, so it doesn't shock them. It's like that would never happen because they've already heard it, they've kind of come to terms with it, and then they just put it aside. And they kind of sometimes I feel like they might use conspiracy theories and the dissemination of them as a disclosure mechanism, which is an interesting thought.
No, get into that. For people who maybe haven't heard that theory.
Well, like just say the lab leak. The lab leak. Most people that were talking about that were considered conspiracy theorists, and it got out there. Everyone heard it at least once or twice, and then they let the heat die down, and they dismiss it when it happens. They let the heat die down, and then like a year later they softball it in. It was like, yeah, it most likely came from a lab, and Tedros just said it a few weeks ago. Yeah, he agrees too, but by now like everyone's heard it and just been like they eye rolled it, and they don't react as they would if it was like fresh, hot off the press news.
That was one of the things that I heard people talk about in regards to Jon Stewart. Remember when Jon Stewart went on the Colbert show, and all of a sudden he starts talking about how obvious it is that it must have came from this lab, and some people were saying like, why would they let him say it when they were banning people like myself?
Well, I think they want him to say it.
Exactly.
I mean, people don't get those platforms. I mean, he could have gone totally AWOL, but then when you see what he's promoting now, he's got his own podcast talking about how a big problem in America is white people, and we have to atone for our sins, and promoting equity across all platforms and all this inclusion. And it sounds very nice and flowery, but at the base of like this equity and sustainability push is an overarching centralized control that amasses in state power. And it's like we could just do these things for the common good, the greater good, and that's getting away from our fundamentals as Americans. And that's what another thing to speak about, like my town, I live in Connecticut, so it's a liberal leaning state, and I'm gonna live in a liberal leaning town. And everything they speak about has got some sort of equity, diversity, inclusion, or sustainability element to it. And in local towns, every 10 years, they do a plan for this is an example of what's going on, of like redevelopment. And it's called like the Manchester Next Project. And it's for 2030. And they had one for 2020, which was called Manchester 21st Century. They're kind of these mirrors of the UN's rollout of like their sustainability agenda. But anyway, the town hired this consultant to plan out this 2030 agenda for the town. And people asked like for a definition of sustainability. And the consultancy firm couldn't offer a definition of sustainability, and neither could the town. And I ended up FOIA requesting the town for definitions for these two words that they're putting in all of their resolutions and topics for discussion, and having whole committees. They're thinking about opening an office of health equity in town to address racial disparities from underserved communities. And they couldn't, when I filed the FOIA request, and it took 17 days, and they sent me back a one sentence, 2-sentence response that said the town does not keep a definition, a glossary of terms, or a dictionary for definitions of words on hand. And it's like, but you're using these words kind of amorphously in different ways to benefit certain people or certain populations, or to push through certain agendas without even having a defined meaning. It's like that doesn't hold water. That's not appropriate. And I brought that up, and I clipped it, and people hear it all the time. But equity is not the same as equality, and but people, they don't know the etymology of the words, or they don't have the understanding to even question it. So just like equity, equality, it's great, but it's all getting pushed through slowly but surely because people aren't speaking at a local level. And not that I'm having a great influence, but I am constantly pushing back. And like an example of what could possibly happen, so I'll give you an example that happened in town. Over this past summer, we had a storm come through, and it dropped a bunch of rain. And it's actually the local politicians, the senators, Murphy and Blumenthal came because we had a road washout in my town. And we also had some other flooding. But with the road washed out, all the politicians came and they said, this is all climate change's fault and we need to get net zero and we need to get all this carbon thing going. And they went to that place and then they went to, that was, where the hell's the other spot that flooded out? There was another spot that flooded out. Oh, the Charter Oak Park. It's a great park for playgrounds and stuff. That flooded out. And they want to take all this money and put it toward the park and this road. But they don't, and they keep talking about having this like climate resiliency plan in place in town. So this past meeting, they said, oh, we have $700,000 in the climate resiliency fund. And an episode that happened from this flooding was that there was this is stories rambling. A contractor was redoing a road and they covered over all the storm drains. So when we got 4 inches of rain in 2 hours, all the water couldn't go in the storm drains. It ended up flooding a neighborhood out. And like 12 people had their houses flooded, their basements, everything mechanical got destroyed. And the town refused to take any responsibility and the contractor refused to take any responsibility. So they just they wouldn't even respond to their phone calls or emails or anything. And the residents went to the town and complained on camera at the board of directors meetings, and everyone just blinked and there wasn't any movement. There was no contact with the insurance companies or anything. So they say this last meeting, they have $700,000 in this fund. So I get up and I'm like, I wonder how much of this money, this almost $1 million, is going to go to help our friends on Girard Street. They got flooded out by the contractor's neglect and the town's neglect. And then I just sat down. And then, a few minutes later, one of the board of directors was like, hey, you think we could use any of this money to help the people on Girard Street that got flooded? And it was like, well, this is a conversation we're going to have to explore more about. But if those kind of things weren't said, they'd probably just go right through that, and that wouldn't have come up. So that gives me a little. And I talked to a few of the neighbors there. They saw the video. This is great. This is great news. Hopefully, we can apply some more pressure and get some relief. So that's good.
Well, public pressure does help, right? And I think that, we're talking about good things that the few good things that have come out of 2020 and that whole experience. A few of those things are, one, I think homeschooling is not looked at the same way as it used to be looked at. And two, people realize that you have to get involved locally because a lot of us have neglected what's happened in our backyard. Myself, I'm guilty of it too. I will do show after show about global events and historical events. And I had a bunch of stuff that was going on locally that I wasn't aware of, and a bunch of crazy people that were running our school committee that I wasn't aware of. And so I think we're all able to do something, to start a little ripple, and locally is the best way of doing so. And like you said, even if it is just kind of planting the seed in regards to like a suggestion of where to spend the money or whatever it may be, you're at least sparking the conversation, and who knows where that will lead you. But people do need to get involved. People need to get involved with the school committee, whatever, locally in all aspects, in all departments. Because if you don't get involved, then next thing you know, when shit hits the fan, like when COVID happened, we had a bunch of crazy people in our school committee who wanted to just put masks on kids forever until the cows came home, and wanted to have all these crazy restrictions. And why were they there? And why wasn't there anybody to oppose them in a part of the school committee? Because most of the people who would oppose them, like myself, neglected it and didn't care what was going on locally until you had no choice but to care. So I think that is one of the good things that have come out of 2020. People are much more open to the idea of homeschooling. They're much more open to the idea that they need to get involved, because I think when everything's going well, you're just like, okay, well, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. But and then once you're forced to have to pay attention to these issues, all of a sudden it puts it under a magnifying glass, and you notice like, oh crap, like we have teachers that are pushing their own ideology on the kids. We have school committee members that are pushing their own ideology, and that's one of the biggest issues of today. Is this whole idea of that schools are teaching kids what to think instead of how to think. And as a parent, it's like it's kind of scary to send your kids to school. You hope that they have some decent teachers, but it's like the only real way of avoiding even crossing your fingers and hoping you have some teachers that don't plant some of their own thoughts in your kid's brain is homeschooling.
So it's great that the homeschooling community is growing exponentially, and that it's not being shunned upon as or not just shunned, but just kind of dismissed as it had been previously. I think a lot of people see the kind of things that the kids are being taught at school, and it doesn't align with their values, so they're pulling them. But the thing is, like, I'm going to butcher this quote. It's a Plato quote, I believe, but it's like, if good men don't want to get involved in politics, expect to be ruled by evil men. And not that I'm running for a position in local politics, but if you're not involved in watching and observing and pushing back and aware of what's happening, then the fox is guarding the hen house to a certain extent. So like, we had COVID happen, and really nobody in my town, a lot of people that I spoke with on the street or that I knew personally or acquaintances, they were not happy with what was going on, but nobody would speak about it openly in public. But a few months later, when you had the George Floyd situation happen and the country got turned on its ear, it went from stay away from each other to, okay, you can go out and protest as long as it's for George Floyd. Don't protest COVID lockdowns, but protest for George Floyd, go ahead. Dozens of people were speaking, like 40 sometimes in one night. And nobody would speak about how what was happening all around us was taking away everyone's rights. People just want to talk about George Floyd's rights, or one group's rights. And if people don't start getting involved, not like today, but like yesterday, and start doing it on a regular basis, expect more of the same, I guess. Because unless you put up some sort of active resistance, there's no effect of just knowing things. And in terms of like, just the other day at a meeting, one of the guys that he speaks regularly too, and I have to respect him. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, most things, but he speaks regularly and he speaks his mind. But a bunch of money had been allocated from the federal government to 3 and 4 year olds to prepare them for the grade of kindergarten, prepare them for kindergarten. And he got up and spoke about how maybe they should spend some of the money promoting like equity and like teaching about race to 3 and 4 year olds. And it's like his message is being heard like all the time. He gets up there all the time and speaks. And I'm sure some of those board members are like, that sounds like a good idea to me. And not that you should, it just seems like something for 3 and 4 year olds, you won't want to start riling them up. Might be better just to focus on like blocks and playing and interacting with each other than telling about how they're different and one person's father is worse than the other person's father. It's wild.
Well, the thing is with getting involved locally is that for a long time, people like myself in the alternative media community would say, like, hey, voting doesn't matter, getting involved doesn't matter, it's all corrupt, the whole system's messed up. But I think the one exception to the rule might be locally. It's funny because this reminds me, Sam Tripoli shared something on his Instagram. It was Crowder. You know how he does those debates where it's like change my mind. He's sitting in front of a table that says voting is an adult version of writing a letter to Santa Claus. Change my mind, and it's funny, and that's literally how many people like myself would look at getting involved. Like it's just it's nonsense. But local, I guess one thing myself didn't take in consideration, and using myself as an example, because I don't want to talk for everybody else who was kind of saying the same things I was saying, but I didn't take in consideration that locally is probably one of the few places where you can directly make an impact and immediately and have your voice heard and do something about. And so this whole idea of like the whole system's corrupt and it's all theater, none of it means anything, and they don't really care what about you anyway, so what's the point of participating in their game, makes sense until you talk about local topics, and then it seems like you can kind of get involved and make create an impact much easier locally. And it's I mean, in regards to like homeschooling, what motivated you guys to homeschool? Was it one specific issue? Was there one thing that you're concerned about? Or maybe, well, I mean, you went to a Catholic school, like you said, right?
Yeah, I went to Catholic school growing up. My wife went to public school, and then she ended up doing high school at a private school, and then she became a teacher at the private school. I mean, we just both realized that the public education system is fairly lacking, and it's also kind of oppressive, especially for young boys. I mean, I went to school, and there was definitely a movement to try to get me on, prescription drugs for, lack of self-control, just having a lot of energy as a kid. And luckily, my parents were not into that. They were like, we're not putting this guy in any, drugs. He just got a lot of energy. But I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to deal with the social issues that are coming up that are coming in the fore. And mostly, the big thing was I didn't want to subject my kids to 56 vaccines and follow the schedule. Like when our parents were kids, they got a couple, 3 vaccines. When we were kids, we might have gotten 9 to 12, and now the schedule is 50. I think it's 56. And knowing people who had kids that hadn't had good reactions, kind of led us to just steer away from it. Our first children were twins, and they came out. They're the smallest babies I'd seen in person. They were like 4.5 pounds, a little bit over 4.5 pounds. But the threshold for vaccination at the hospital were like 4 pounds and, as a newborn, if the baby was in the NICU. So when we got the babies, we went to the NICU. They were 6 weeks premature, and they're like, "Well, we're going to vaccinate them for Hep B." I said, "We're not vaccinating for Hep B right now." And I said, "Why not?" I said, "Because they're just 4 pounds, and they're not in any danger of contracting Hep B right now." And the nurse says, "Well, they're going to need it for school, right?" And I said, "Yeah, but that's not for like 5 years. So let's just take it easy here. The kids are like 3 hours old." And
isn't that fucking crazy?
It was crazy, but that was the first time. And then like it happened 3 more times where I had to be like, "We're not doing Hep B. Thank you. Thanks, but no thanks." And finally, I was like, "Listen, if you ask me again about the Hep B, I'm going to file like a grievance, like a complaint against your license." And that shut it down, right? So we're in the NICU, and the NICU is an interesting place because you have all these different babies at different stages of care. And some of the babies are like in tiny little incubators, and they might only be like 2 or 3 pounds. And other babies are like, they have issues like with breathing or whatever. But the baby that was across from us was a Indian baby. And in order to get your kids out of the NICU, you have to take a baby CPR class. So we took the class with the couple that had the Indian couple. And they said, "Our baby was born just under 3 pounds. She's almost 4 pounds. That was also the threshold for dismissal from the NICU. We're almost going to be able to bring her home." And I was really happy for them. So we took the class together, and they were going to take their baby home in like 2 days. And that day came around, and they were going to discharge the baby. And me and my wife were sitting there with our twins. And the doctor came over and said, "Oh, before we discharge the baby, we want to give her Hep B vaccine so she's safe." And the parents were like, "Okay, sounds good." And me and my wife, I kind of looked at my wife and kind of like raised my eyebrow. I was leery. And they injected the baby, and like 10 minutes later, the baby stops breathing. And they rushed the baby out of there. And we didn't see the baby for, I think, 3 days. And when the baby came back, she had developed sleep apnea. Every time she went to sleep, she would stop breathing. So then they have to have a nurse there 24 hours just to rub the baby's back every time she falls asleep because she stops breathing. So now you're just watching a baby being tortured because it can never sleep with any length, and it just stops breathing all the time. And me and my wife, we saw that with our own eyes, and we were like, this is not appropriate. And then when you look at the vaccine insert for the Hep B vaccine, the Infotrex, it says there's been a noticeable increase in sleep apnea when given to premature infants, but they don't tell you that in the NICU. Anyway, so yeah, homeschooling, a combination of agendas, political agendas being pushed on the kids, Common Core, and vaccines seal the deal.
So you witnessed that whole thing happen. It boggles my mind how many people have had. I know so many people who aren't anti-vaccine or will argue with somebody who is, and yet have directly been affected by a adverse reaction by a vaccine, even if they don't. And a lot of times they'll have like their kid will just get a little sick after the vaccine, and then they'll have some issues later, and they never connect the dots. They never think that it's related at all. I mean, it's not all their fault because, of course, if you go to your pediatrician and this, this kind of brainwashing that happens to us, that if they're a doctor, if they're a pediatrician, then they must have all the answers. And, if my critical thinking skill says that maybe there's a connection here, but they tell me there isn't, then I should listen to them. But it's same thing with the COVID shot, same thing. People have health issues, and I know people who don't relate it to the COVID shot. And it's like, I'm not saying in every case that anytime you get a vaccine that afterwards every health issue you have is directly linked to it, but it's something that you have to at least entertain, right?
Entertain, yeah. It's like the mark of a wise man, not to like believe everything he hears, but to at least entertain it and consider it. But some people, they have their lane, and they think you're not a doctor, you're not a official, you don't have any authority. It's a real diverting to authority, and that's another element of schooling. It's like trust the authority, do these things, and it's very regimented. And I just remember growing up. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really enjoy going to school as much as they say that kids do. So I wanted my kids to have a different experience.
Yeah, I didn't like school at all. I was much like you. I always rebelled kind of against. I didn't like being told what to do. Not like in a jerk way, but it's like I didn't like people who just told me what to do and didn't like if I asked questions, or if I had, if I said it, wasn't enjoying it, or like they just want you to sit there and just consume whatever information they're giving you, do whatever task that they ask you to do. And they don't want any pushback whatsoever. And if you do push back at all, then you're messing up the whole thing and you get in trouble. And I just always had an issue with that. That's why even growing up, being Portuguese and going to Sunday school and being Catholic, that's kind of what pushed me away from religion at such a young age. It was kind of a similar type of mentality where if I ever asked questions, I would get in trouble. And if I ever pushed back, I would get in trouble. And I'm like, well, I don't like this, and like I've said on the show a bunch of times, I left a team thinking I joined a team that wasn't tribalistic, and then you realize like, oh, these atheists are equally as tribalistic and obsessed with their worldview as the other side, and they also don't like to be questioned or told that they're wrong about anything. So it's it is difficult, but for parents listening who are thinking about like that. Homeschooling, they're thinking about maybe going down that road and exploring those ideas. The typical thing you always hear is, oh, how about social skills? Are they going to lack in those type of things? But now with the popularity of it growing, you're seeing more and more parents gather and being more creative with that type of stuff. And it's funny because even if it was true that maybe your kid lacks a little bit in social skills, that's something you could fix. And it's like, but shouldn't you be more concerned about like like you said, all the vaccines they have to take, or all the ideologies that they're being fed? Like that's not concerning, but you're worried about social skills. But you're not worried about like your 5-year-old boy or your 6-year-old or 7-year-old boy being asked if he ever feels like a woman.
Well, it's like it's everywhere. So here's another example from just today. This town sent out a survey because they closed down 3 schools in town. So what's happening in education all over is they're centralizing it. And they had 3 different neighborhood schools in my town that they closed down 10 years ago, and they bus the kids to more centralized locations now. That's a way to get the administration under the same ideas. They can get rid of problem teachers, and it's just a way to blend everyone together so you don't have as much neighborhood and community building. So they have these 3 schools, and they've been mothballed for 10 years. And I'm wondering where the hell I'm going with the story. Good grief. What the hell we're just going to have to pick up? What the hell we were just talking about?
Homeschooling?
Oh, yeah.
Social skills?
Yeah, dude, I'm fucking...
Parents gathering, kids together. Oh, and then maybe pushing... Or your asking your boy if he thinks he's a girl in
Oh,
school?
excuse me. Right. Yes, they sent out a survey about the schools. Just cut that out, Ricky. They sent out a survey about the schools, and it's asking what you identify as just the survey participant. And there was at least 15 different choices. I took screen grabs of it all. And then it asks you for your sexual orientation. And there's like pan and queer and queer questioning and unknown and there are 15 of those. And it's like 5 or 6 different where you fall politically by your sexual orientation, your how you identify yourself as minority, and it's just like in everything. Like you can't get away from it. They send out these schools to the parents. They send out surveys from the school to the parents in town. Like I said, my kids are homeschooled, but my friends that are in school send me the surveys because it's like a Google Doc link, and it's asking you for your elementary school's child's sexual orientation. And it's like, how is that relevant to just like reading, writing, and arithmetic? But it's not. It's because like the school is trying to become like the everything. Like you go there for your family, your community, your peers, and like pushing this stuff that I don't think most people, if they knew what was actually going on, would be for it. Some people would be, but most people are just checked out. You know, they think I can send my kid to school and the teacher knows best, and I'll let them do their thing, which is unfortunate. One of the big parts about public schooling that I think lets them get away with that is that everyone has to pay property taxes, which goes to the school. So then you don't have any like real vested interest, because if you had to pay a higher property tax while you had kids in school, then I think you'd be more motivated to actually figure out what's going on in school. But the way that they set the property tax structure up, where everyone pays for the kids to go to school, leads to people just checking out.
Well, that's the thing that's kind of surprising, is that you would assume some parents, or most parents, that heard what they were talking about, discussing with their children, they'd be against it. But there's a huge part of, I shouldn't say huge, but there's obviously people who are more left-leaning who think that it's completely okay for, okay, so this is maybe the issue, right? The issue is that there's some parents who believe that the teacher's just trying to help the kid, like they're giving them somebody to talk to, they're giving somebody, and if that was true, then maybe I wouldn't be completely against it. But I never really feel like those intentions are really those aren't really the intentions. That it's like everything, climate change, whatever it may be. It's like there's people who truly believe that these battles are being fought for the greater good of humanity, when the truth is it's like you're just a pawn in a bigger game.
And those battles don't need to be fought by kindergartners, preschoolers, and third graders. Like they can just be kids for a little while before you have to tell them all these things about how horrible your society grew up in is. It's like it's pretty whack.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the fact kids should not be asked about their gender or any of that stuff. Like that stuff won't come up. Most of the time, it won't come up organically. It gets brought up. Kids. My son, for example, one of his best friends in school is Asian. One of his best friends outside of school is this older kid who's a neighbor, lives up the street, and he's mixed race. And my son never cares or asks or comments on any of that stuff. I mean, like, he doesn't care that one kid looks different than him. He's Asian. One other kid looks different than him. He's mixed race. Like he could care less. He just wants to play with his friends, and he likes those kids because those are kids he gets along with, that he has some common interests, whatever it may be. So all you're doing is you're sparking these conversations. You're planting the seed to eventually lead down the path of it becoming an issue, and somebody's skin color or race or whatever it may be, nationality, becomes a topic or a reason to like or dislike somebody. Kids don't care. And like you said, just like they should wait to give a kid a Hep shot, because they're not in danger of anything yet. Well, they should also wait to have these discussions, because they're not even in their, it's not even in their consciousness yet.
But if you implant it in their consciousness, it's going to make a big impression, especially if you keep repeating it. And that's like a Lenin quote, like, give me a kid for 3 years and I'll own his mind, like they know how powerful it is to get to the youth and to tell them that they don't have a future because of climate change, or, you know, you could be whatever sex or gender you want because that's just the way things are now. And I mean, you can make that decision. Is it going to give you the best outcomes in life? Possibly not. Just judging by statistics and like the outcomes for trans people, it's usually not. They have the highest, I believe, rates of suicide of any group. So it's not something that you should be like promoting, or like, I don't even know why they're introducing the topic. I don't know if you've heard of any of this, but like they had these studies that kids that went to DARE, like drug awareness, rehabilitation, education, whatever, were more like inclined to try different drugs because they had learned about them. And it's kind of like you're showing the kid what this thing is, and like, oh, this will get you really pepped up, and this will get you really, you know, a lot of energy, and this will calm you down. And these kids are like, oh, let me try that, because they know about it now. And just like if you introduce like all these different sexual orientations, my buddy, you know, works in a school, and he's like half the girls in the school, in the high school, are bi. And he's like, that's a social thing. That's not a natural thing that just like happened. That's like socially cool and trendy to be that. And it's reinforced in television programming and music and celebrities and you know, just like all the star hustle. And they don't mind. I mean, the schools are wild compared to what they used to be. I can assure you that.
Well, it's the forbidden fruit. One of my best friends is a detective, and he would always talk about how when there was a strain of, you know, Oxycontins or whatever it was, or cocaine, anytime there was something that was like super dangerous and was going around, and there was, you know, some street name for it, and they're like, hey, this drug is killing people, like the demand for it would always go up because it's like the forbidden fruit, or people would think, oh, it must really work. It must really do something crazy. I want to give it a try. So it's, yeah, I mean, sometimes talking about something only makes it worse. Same thing with like, and I guess this is kind of a bad example, but I was going to say like any mass murderers or school shooters or, you know, whatever, like, you know, there's always copycats. So yeah, it's kind of like a example of how if somebody sees something, the likelihood, or you talk about it, the likelihood of somebody doing it might increase. But, you know, there's a real issue with like just making kids feel guilty about their, you know, who they are or what they look like or whatever it may be, and things that happened prior to them being alive. It's like, to me, it's crazy, because a lot of people who were doing like those ancestry DNA tests, which I don't recommend doing because China's getting all your information, but but if you are doing it right, and the reason why I said that is because they all go to the same lab in China, and nobody knows if they're keeping all that information or not. But the thing is, the you know, 23andMe and all this stuff, like people find out that like, oh, I thought I was Italian, and I thought that like for every generation, you know, going backwards that I could remember, everybody said we're Italian. I thought we're all Italian, and come to find out, you know, we have some of this or we have some of that. So it's like, you know, you make somebody feel guilty based on what? Like, are you doing DNA tests, like to see where they're part of the world they are? They could be the suppressors, or they could be the suppressed. You don't know. And there's been so much migration throughout the, you know, since the beginning of civilization. I mean, people migrated from, you know, I'm Portuguese, right? But like the Moors went all the way west to Portugal and Europe. Right. They conquered parts of Europe. There was even a Arabic Portuguese like hybrid language at one time. How do I know that I'm not from those Portuguese people, and not from, you know, the people who were there previously to the Moors or whatever? So it's like, but my point is like, you don't even, like, we're such a melting pot with travel becoming cheaper, and with people connecting, you know, of like most people aren't marrying people of the same culture anymore, or the same place. Like people are traveling, people are marrying people from different places. Like we're such a melting pot. It doesn't even make any logical sense to continue this idea that like, oh, you're a suppressor, or you're this or you're that. It's like, you know, so many of us are a mixture of things. And
well, it's just like a continuation of like, you're guilty for the sins of your father. And not, it's good to look at your culture, and our society and culture is extremely sick. And I think a lot of people in the you know, the alternative news or information stream agree with that. But then there's this whole other faction that like is weaponizing discrimination or equity, and they're saying it's all our fault, when people in the alternative are like, no, this is just the system and how it's been used to like cast us against each other. but people want to get angry at their neighbor who like has a NASCAR flag, listens to country, as opposed to, maybe people on a local level might care about those issues, but when you start to get to like the state and federal issues, they'll pay a lot of lip service to them, but not much changes. Historically, they're talking about disparities in sentencing and stuff for decades. Not much changes. It's only when it's convenient for the powers that be to harness that energy that you might get some change. So like my town, they had all these protests, and it was fairly, it was definitely peaceful, and it was fairly coordinated. And the town's response to the George Floyd protests and the BLM protests were, we're going to give all the town employees another paid day off. And I just don't understand like how that translates to like, another paid day off for Juneteenth. So then, there's this whole push for Juneteenth to be a paid day off federally, and I guess they got that through. But my town, made it, that was their like push for equity and diversity and inclusion, is like, we're gonna give all paid employees a day off. We're like, how tone deaf is that? I suggested, like, why don't you make it a paid service day where town employees volunteer for some sort of lottery system where minority elderly people will be able to benefit because they'll help them fix their yards or do some sort of paint their porch or whatever. Then like actually the community that's been affected historically gets some benefit out of it, and you're not just paying a bunch of union employees for another paid day off. We have the most in the entire state of Connecticut at 14. So change happens. It's just usually not in any meaningful way, and it's usually benefiting the people that are calling the shots or creating the problem to begin with. Like any sort of problem the government finds, like, what's the solution? They need us to give them a bunch of money so they can pour that money into fixing it. And then a couple of decades later, like, man, this is more broken than ever. So the solution, we need a bunch more money to pour into fix it. It's happening right now, on a macro with Ukraine. It's like, we just got out of Afghanistan, and the solution is like, well, we had this big vacuum of news and distractions, so let's start a war. Let's get a proxy war going in Ukraine, and then try to sell it as like it's this holy war and it's against this evil dude, and it's unbelievable. They're jumping the shark left and right, and thankfully more people are seeing it. And but I'm ranting now.
Well, I'm glad, because people are probably tired of hearing me talk, but it is, yeah, I mean, we live in crazy times, and we live in such crazy times that people aren't getting irate when they hear that we're sending billions of dollars over to Ukraine, when people here are paying $6 a gallon for gas. You can't go to, I can go to a grocery store, spend $100+ and not come home with dinner. Like, would not, it's fucking crazy. Like, the prices of everything are insanely high. Our infrastructure sucks. Everything's, people are making less money. The dollar's losing its value. There's like all this, nonsense going on. And yet, like, we're not upset when we hear about, the fact that the government's not doing anything to help you out, like, but they're sending money overseas. Like, they're not putting any pressure on the oil companies or anything like that to lower the prices. It's just, it's insane. And then all these sanctions and stuff like that. I mean, it hasn't hurt Russia at all. And yet we're being hurt at home. And people, I mean, to me, these are the things that people should be protesting about, which is a little bit concerning because, people aren't upset yet. And it's because maybe they still have enough money to survive. But if it gets to a point where it's so bad that people are losing their houses, their cars, and they can't feed their family, that's typically when things will get bad enough that people actually protest, and people actually get upset.
Well, Americans are too comfortable. So I actually attended like a support Ukraine protest in my town, because I always will attend protests from people that I might not agree with, because I want to get the vibe of it. I want to see who they are and what they're up to, and talk to a few of them, have some conversations. And I go more of as an observer than a participant. So I showed up, and there was about 120 people there. It was in this little park in town. And who's at the podium but Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut. And he's talking about how Putin is evil, and he's a communist who wants to reestablish the USSR, and we can never allow these, communists to take control again. And he's creating war crimes in the Donbass and all these things. Putin's the devil, right? And then he's like, well, I got to go because I got to go catch a flight, literally. And he's like Skeletor, but he's wearing this big puffy winter jacket because it was like springtime. He runs away. And I thought about chasing him down for a question, but I just was like befuddled because this guy is talking about how Putin's a communist and we got to get rid of these communists, and he's trying to create this new order of communists. And Senator Blumenthal gave like a keynote address to the Connecticut Communist Party's holiday award dinner, like a month and a half prior, and it's on film, and there's a woman introducing him on behalf of the Connecticut Communist Party. So then I go to the next board of directors meetings, and I'm like, I don't know which way the wind's blowing with Senator Blumenthal, and I don't think he does either. Like, is he for communists? Is he against communists? Like, I don't understand. Like, because he's for the Connecticut communists, but are they different than the Russian communists just because they're Russian, or what's going on here? He needs to get his story straight. But that just is a blatant hypocrisy that everybody can see, and it's like, yeah, this doesn't fly, and people want to get caught up in all sorts of partisan stuff when we both know the two-party system is pretty poor, not do us any favors. And maybe to dig our way out of the hole, some people will be voting Republican this time around. We'll see. But if you point out things that are blatantly obvious, you can't really say, well, you try to limit the ability for them to say, well, that's my party, that's my guy. Well, it's like, if that's your guy and he's doing those things that are completely hypocritical, then maybe you should reassess who your guy is. Or don't tell me, don't bite my head off for telling you about it. Don't talk to him about the fact that he's endorsed communists in Connecticut and he's against communists in Russia. He's got to figure that out.
Yeah, and people, well, okay, so I know yourself, kind of like me, where we were going to these protests, we were seeing a lot of the Trump people, the MAGA people, kind of fighting for the same things we're fighting for. And it like I always said, I'm like, I don't think my views have changed. I just think the people who were by my side, fighting for those things have changed slightly. And you're starting to hear a lot of discussion about like the next election, if Trump runs, if the DeSantis runs. I mean, you're very much like me in regards to like understanding it's all theater and not much changes. But I'm kind of so proud of like what DeSantis did in regards to his pushback against COVID that I'm like, you know what? Like, even though I'm not a big fan of voting and I don't think it really matters that much, it might be the one time where I might consider it. And the worst of two evils it isn't that bad, right? I mean, do you? What's your feelings on that? Would you?
My feelings, don't worry about DeSantis or Trump. Worry about who's going to be on the ballot for your local shit.
So is that where you stand on all that? Do you still think that you're in regards to federal elections, like it's not worth your time? It doesn't change much. Focus more on.
No, you could shoot from the hip when if you're talking about a federal election. I haven't voted for president in a long time, and I've voted for local stuff in the last three turns. Last time I tried to vote for president, I was up in Vermont, and I cruised in, and it was getting close to the end of the polls. And I walk in, I give them my address, give them my ID, whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you're over there." So I go over to this other lady, and she checks. She says, "You're not on this list. You should go check this list." And when I walked in, they're like, 5 minutes till polls close. I'm in there for like 45 seconds. They're like, 2 minutes till polls close. I go over to this other lady. They're like, 1 minute to poll close. Like, I basically got run out of there without voting. I'd only been in there for about a minute and a half, and somehow 5 minutes had gone by, according to these people. And so I haven't voted for a president since then. But, I mean, that whoever the Democrats are going to run isn't going to be anyone better than DeSantis.
Yeah, and the
he's
thing,
he's the best big candidate you'd have. So just vote for DeSantis, but focus your energy and your attention on what's happening locally, and get people to vote for the people locally that are going to, keep the kids out of the masks, keep the kids together, not push crazy, lockdowns in the future.
Yeah, I think the thing with the vaccine issue, I'm so passionate about it because obviously it involves our kids, and the concerns about our kids wearing masks, the concern about our kids obviously losing the religious exemption for schools. Like, my kids aren't vaccinated at all either. Luckily, we didn't have to homeschool to do that. They could, or I'd say luckily, maybe if we were forced to homeschool, maybe they would be homeschooled. And
well, like say my older sons, they could have gotten exemptions. I could have put those on file, but what's that going to do for my younger son and my younger daughter who aren't in school? So then the state's picking and choosing which one of my kids can go to school.
Yeah,
it's blatantly at its face discriminatory, and I don't understand why people are so nonchalant about it. Especially, I mean, now they got a taste of their medicine because people I knew that were in the healthcare are like, I don't want to get this vaccine. This is bullshit. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I've been telling you this for like 5 years, dude. And they're like, oh, fuck. I was like, I wish you were out there earlier. But another thing is, like, people just don't hear it. A lot of people will talk to each other about how dissatisfied they are, but they just don't send an email or make a phone call or go to a meeting. And, some people say that, Tripoli is like, oh, we're winning this information war. And we are definitely making some good strides, but it's no time to let up. And this is when people need to be like really finding their voice and realizing that, like, as a man, you have a responsibility to protect your family and at least speak for them and be an advocate for them. And in the vaccine issue, like, so many mothers are like very fiercely involved, and not too many fathers are because they're working. And I was always encouraging their dads, and I was always down there at the protests and talking to them, my reps, like, get in there. Like, it's a whole different energy when a male rep talks to a group of 3 moms than if just one dad sits in and is like, listen, like, I don't agree with anything you're saying, and this is why. Men are more confrontational, and it changes the dynamic of how people to talk to a group if there's a man there, especially from like a person of authority. So I think men should come into their power now and like start advocating for their families and their kids' futures, because our kids aren't able to do it. They're just young, and it's our responsibility to step up.
Yeah, when you look at like the anti-GMO movement, that the Monsanto stuff, the vaccine stuff, it was always a lot of moms. You didn't see a whole lot of males getting involved in it. And, it's nice to see that's changing a little bit. You're starting to see fathers become much more aware of what is going on and being much more vocal about it. But even with myself, like my wife would sometimes either have a friend of a friend or somebody that she ran into at work that would bring up the vaccine thing, and she's like, oh, you got to talk to my husband and he'll send you some information or whatever. And it was always moms. It was never, typically it was a similar story. They all had similar stories in regards to like, okay, I had a kid, I became a parent, or I was pregnant, and now I started doing some research, and then it led me down this rabbit hole. And, so I think maybe because as a mother and having this child growing in you, and maybe feeling like you're maybe, and I don't want to say more responsible, but you might feel that way, that you're the most responsible for this child, their health, and they end up doing a little bit of research and actually finding some stuff. The concern now is that if you're a parent today, they've suppressed so many of those documentaries and content creators that even if you did want to research that stuff, even if you had a little bit of doubt, and you wanted to be like, oh, let me see if there's any substance to this anti-vaccine debate, then they just don't find it. And then people like yourself and me, we look like crazy people because all the things we've been referencing and all the things that we've been saying, there's no evidence that there's any science or any actual reason to believe these things. So, which is why censorship has become such a huge issue. But vaccines were a very hot topic. I mean, it took people, like you said, it's good that guys are getting involved because it was a very I can't even talk right now, controversial topic. You would get in a lot of debates. It was really hard to get a discussion about vaccines where somebody wouldn't get angry, and I can't even talk. I'm like losing my
confrontational.
Confrontational. Yeah. See, every once in a while.
Hey, I got my vaccines and I'm fine. So why can't you get yours? And people that
I
are
hear
like
that
older will say that to me, and I'm like, you got 3 as a kid, and my kids, they want to get 56, and they're like, what? And then I just take out the phone and show them, and they're like, wow, I didn't know that. And then that kind of just changes. It's like a light switch. A lot of people, because they're just so used to seeing things on TV, and people don't want to talk about uncomfortable situations or topics. Don't talk about religion or politics. Don't do it. You don't want to upset people. But the fact that we're so comfortable is why we don't ever say no. And like, I think Passio is like, that's the forgotten word, is like no. Like, people got to just say no. And they made a whole slogan out of it for DARE, just say no. But now it's like the people that were so anti-GMO were mostly people on the left, and the left's just gotten castrated. Maybe that's why there's no male voices out there speaking on that platform, because they used to be anti-war, anti-GMO, and now like most of them are GMOs. And there's no anti-war movement. Now they're like, I support Ukraine. They have flags. And I'm like, how about not supporting any wars? But, they've managed to, the anti-war movement died with Obama because he got in, he was so smooth and so cool. And no one wanted to criticize the fact that like we're expanding in Africa and we're building this huge embassy continuation of it. What happened to Guantanamo? Yeah, now I can't speak. It's contagious. We need a vaccine. Guantanamo Bay closure. He never closed anything. He just empowered it all, and he did it so smoothly that now people are just like, whatever, just do what the experts say. You're not a scientist. You're not a doctor. You're not an epidemiologist. Just do it, dude. Just do it. And it's wild. Like walking, I saw these 2 guys. I pick up stuff on the side of the road and I flip it. I sell it. So I saw these 2 guys walking in my neighborhood last summer, and I thought they were like vaccine. They're taking like a survey for vaccines. So I pulled up, and look who it is. It's 2 of the board of directors. So I started talking about how they're this party of like diversity and inclusion and tolerance being on the left, but they don't speak about any of these vaccine mandates for adults, and they don't say a word about anything that's going down and closing small businesses. And you guys used to be anti-corporation on the left, and now you're just like going with the corporations. And we got to the vaccine, and one of the board of directors is like, just get the vaccine, just get the vaccine, just get it, like 3 times, just get it. And it's like, that's not an answer to someone's a religious objection to the fact that they're using abortifetal tissue in the vaccines. Like, you can't just get it and just make that go away in someone's mind or their heart. But for these people, they can. It's just like, just do what you're told.
But but I feel like that brainwashing, that vaccines are always good. I've said this on the show multiple times. It used to be a very confrontational, a very confrontational topic where people could not talk about it without fighting, and people were so passionate about it. And the crazy thing is, like, both sides were kind of passionate about it, but the crazy part was people on our side were typically informed. The other people would argue with us even and not be informed at all, which would blow my mind. I'm like, you don't know anything about vaccine courts, you don't know anything about the VAR system, you don't know anything about the lack of liability, you don't know anything about any of this stuff, you don't know anything about the CDC whistleblower, but yet you're so passionately telling me I'm wrong. And now I feel like that's changed a little bit. Like, you're starting to see people become much more open to the fact, like, okay, I'm questioning the mRNA vaccine, and this opens a door to me questioning maybe all vaccines, because now I'm rethinking everything. And but I think a lot of that attitude of like, just get it, is because we've been conditioned to believe at such a young age. You start off as a child getting vaccines, you never question them, you give them to children. If we're giving them to children, it can't be unsafe, right? Because why would we give children something that's unsafe? And pediatricians, they don't care about money, they only care about babies. And if they're saying that they're safe and effective, then what is there to question? So at such a young age, you're conditioned to believe the vaccines have cured us of polio and all these other issues, and historically they've saved the world and saved the population and saved humanity. And now, as an adult, that conditioning is so deep rooted in our consciousness that we can't even, just because the mRNA vaccine is in a vaccine, and it's like that alone makes us think that it must be good. It's like we've been so conditioned. It was so hard for people to go against this idea that maybe not all vaccines are good. Maybe we're taking too many, and maybe all the settled science wasn't settled at all. But you
Well,
keep,
they just trick people with words, like they said, oh, Pfizer is fully approved. And then everyone's like, oh, Pfizer's fully approved. It's great. No, it's like the Comirnaty version of Pfizer is fully approved. And when you referenced that vaccine insert thing I did the other day, like I just went around the pharmacies in my town 2 weeks ago and I asked them for the Pfizer vaccine, and nobody had the Pfizer vaccine. You could only get the Moderna, which I think is still under EUA. And now they're rolling out the vaccine for the kids. And luckily, I don't think a lot of the parents are saying, my 6 months to 5-year-old needs a COVID vaccine. Thank God. I think the rates are pretty low so far. But that's under emergency use authorization. But people are like, no, it's approved, because they're not aware, and they're low information people, and bless their hearts, but they're not. Some people aren't going to do the legwork to like really dig in, and that's why I don't make a lot of memes, but memes are powerful, and getting like small bits of information to people just to make them ask a question is really important. And like you said, plant some seeds, small nuggets. I got a garden in my front yard, and I have an old television, and I knocked out the tube of it, and I have a sign in it that says plant seeds. It's an old like antenna television. It's on my fence post. And even doing that, like every few months I change the sign. I have another sign on this other tree I have in my yard. It says next up money pox, and people walk by like, I like your sign, and it's like a joke, but people, they resonate with it. And when they're walking, then I know the people in my neighborhood who identify with it. And that's another big part. Just don't talk to your board of directors or your town council. Talk to your neighbors. And have everyone in the street not convinced of my way, but willing to have a conversation and talk about some fun topics just in the driveway, and looking for more information that I send them along, which is cool. But it all happens with just conversation and just a smile and a positive attitude.
and the courage to speak up, because I think a lot of people, you saw it during the COVID times, and even with the vaccine issue, like I said, back in the day, it was a very confrontational issue. And if you spoke up against it, like if you just shared your thoughts about vaccines, you would get a couple people in the group. They'd be like, you know what, that makes sense, or yeah, I've had my doubts about it, or this. But it's like there's a lot of people who feel the same way and might have similar thoughts, but they don't have the courage to deal with the public criticism or the pushback, or just maybe the debate that it might spark. But once you do it, then it's like, okay, now I can tell this person, like, hey, you know what, I like that thought, or I like that idea, or I like that sign, or I have similar thoughts and ideas. So that's why it's so important to speak up and speak out and not be afraid of pushback or being criticized.
Fear is how they got you in the first place with COVID. It terrified everybody. And I go and speak locally, and I post the videos, and I get good responses, and people message me and say, oh, thank you so much for speaking. I agree with you so much of what you say. And I always like, well, come help me, come speak, and people are nervous that I'm not a good public speaker, or I don't know what I would say. But it's like, well, if you don't think what's happening is appropriate, that's all you have to say. It's like, I don't think what's happening around us in town and in the state and the country is appropriate. Like, and just list some questions. Like, you don't need to have a big speech, but if you don't say it, who's going to? And like, nobody's going to speak on your behalf. And we've kind of lost our ability to like interact, because we've gotten sucked into like social media, and that's a whole other can of worms. Like, people lose friendships over it. People are misinterpreted. But if you're speaking to somebody in person and from the heart, and you believe what you're saying, they're a lot more likely to at least consider what you're saying than if you try to have like I'm going to change your mind on Facebook. That's not going to happen. And at least even if, like I said before, like this guy speaks in my town very often, I don't agree with him, but I respect him from going up there and saying it, because if he often says, I'm the only person of color in the room, and a lot of times he is, and he's like, I'm going to speak on behalf of them. Now, not that that gives you like, well, that's just his perspective, So he's bringing his perspective to the debate, and I appreciate that. But if you don't bring your perspective, it's hard to complain about the fact that nobody listened to you when you don't have the courage to stand up. And what's the worst going to happen? Like right now, they're not going to haul you away. They're not going to beat your door down in the middle of the night if you get up and speak, and you just got to do it. It's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and you'll learn things and you'll make mistakes, but like just keep doing it and just stay the course. If you don't speak now, you've heard that. It's like they came for the trade unionists and I didn't say anything, and they came for the Jews and I didn't say anything, and they came for the other guy and I didn't say anything. And before you know it, nobody said anything because there was nobody left. And especially in the days of like censorship and big tech algorithms taking over and people steering you in certain directions, social network type shit, in person, on the record, live, you can't beat it. And I appreciate what Alex Stein is doing. And he's a wild man, and that's great. But you don't have to like be a clown completely. I like to joke around sometimes. I throw some zingers in there. But in today's age, you can zoom in. You can have basically a teleprompter in front of you. You don't have to see anyone's face. You can just read the teleprompter and turn it off when you're done. And I just encourage people to find the courage and take a shot. Do it. It might be difficult the first time, but it gets easier.
Yeah, Alex Stein, I love what he's doing because he's getting attention. I'm just hoping he doesn't, get the wrong type of attention. It's like he has a message and he has something to say, and I hope that his way of getting attention doesn't completely shadow, those other things. That's why the Dr. Fauci Give Me a Ouchie song was so great, because it kind of showed how silly it all was and how ridiculous it all was. But now, I don't think he expected the AOC thing to go as viral as it did. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. He's fearless and he gets attention. And, I give him a lot of credit for doing that. Luke from We Are Change used to do stuff like that back in the day and get right in guys' face and ask him tough questions and not care if he was going to get pushed by security or whatever. So a lot of props and to people like that.
And look at Luke, man. He's recording live out of his RV, traveling around. They haven't black bagged him yet, and he's outspoken. You can do it. Don't. The worst censor you can have is yourself. The self censor. In terms of like Alex Stein's AOC hijinks, I don't think it was in the best of taste. But if you're trying to like make a splash and get a ton of views to get more people into your message, maybe it's calculated risk.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm like, you kind of come off a little bit like a jerk. It's like it only works, and it seemed like it worked in her benefit to paint you as a jerk who's just because then what happens is like people don't look at you as somebody with a message. They look at you like as just a guy who is over the top and saying something that could be borderline sexual harassment or whatever. And it's and I'm not one of those people who think that guys should walk on eggshells because you don't want to offend a girl. Like I think there are people who are overly too sensitive, but he openly kind of sexually harassed her, for lack of a better term. And I like Alex. I've been interviewed on his show. He's been on the Union Unwanted before, and I like Alex. But I think that maybe he knows what he's doing, and maybe he'll turn it on its head and make a big apology video, and then they'll deflate the argument. Who knows? Yeah. Well, that's the thing.
He could have chosen his words a little bit better. I don't know if the adrenaline got to him.
Yeah.
I heard him recently. He's like, "Oh, I've never gone down to the Capitol steps. I didn't realize how easy it was to like get in touch with these people, and they just walk by all the time." And that's another thing like people can do. Like maybe you don't like public speaking. That doesn't mean if you see this person out in town, you can approach them, which was fun because when you start saying, "Hey, why do you support these discriminatory laws they're pushing through?" and there's like a group of that target minorities because minorities are the most people affected by COVID mandates because they don't historically want to get injected by unknown things, which is good on them. They perk up, and then the person kind of looks like they don't look very good. And I've done that a couple times in the grocery store, and that's maybe it's a little easier than public speaking. It's definitely more fun, and I unfortunately didn't record it, But like you said, like Luke cut his teeth on this ambush style kind of, and most people don't even know who their local reps or their town council is, and that's really the first step. I mean, you just got to get on the website and look at some pictures and find out where they are coming from and what party they're in. Like my town, every Democrat on the board is either a state employee or works for a nonprofit aligned with that's getting money from the state. One of them like works in like the treasurer's office. So to me, that seems like a pretty blatant way for there to be like a collusion or a pay for play kind of thing going on. But most people don't care. But when you say it out loud, like, hey, why is every town rep a state employee who wasn't affected by COVID income wise, their business wasn't closed, then people are like, yeah, that's odd that every single one of them is a state employee. And maybe in the next election, they won't vote in a bunch of state employees. Connecticut is the largest employer in the state of Connecticut. Like, the corporation of the state of Connecticut. And in Manchester, Connecticut, the largest employer is the town. So they have like a lot of union pull and influence that way, and just through people's purse strings. And I speak out of the town, and I see town employees that I've run into, and like they'll come up to, I don't know them, and they'll come up to me like, oh, I saw your comments, I really like it. The town's really, it's really taking a turn for the worse. So you never know where you're going to find your fans or people that support what you're doing until you start speaking out.
Absolutely. So
you spoke out once or twice at the Board of Ed, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to school committee meetings. I was very outspoken, and I actually had a lot of local people who contacted me and just appreciated the fact that I was outspoken. There's also some really awesome homeschooling parents who came out anyways and spoke up, which
Isn't that funny that like the biggest group in the vaccine mandates are people that already homeschool their children?
Yeah, I mean,
at least in my experience, that's what the case has been. It's like the majority of people that are actually doing the legwork like already homeschool, so it just doesn't even affect them. But we understand the consequences of what happens if you were just to take that away. And in Connecticut, they did take that away, so you aren't able to get a religious exemption. So you either need to get vaccinated or you can't go to a public or private school. And that's
crazy.
Even for colleges. Like I can't take classes at my local community college because I don't want to get a COVID vaccine. And it's fucked up. And if people don't say things against it, here comes the monkeypox vaccine. They're going to want to get you that in your arm next year.
Well, I think the people, the homeschoolers, they're passionate about these topics. They're knowledgeable about these topics, and chances are some of these topics are the reason why they're homeschooling in the first place. So they went out there to kind of support the fight against these issues. So which I love, but you're right, they have no incentive to do so because they don't really affect them, but they're so passionate about it that they still went out. I was like surprised by how many homeschoolers.
We also know that the things that they're trying to push forward are incremental. So they don't take it all at once, just like any good tyrant takes it one bite at a time. And if you don't just try to have consistent pushback, people in people's ears, then there's no resistance to anything. And it's so funny how the left co-opted this whole word, like we're the resistance to fucking what? To paying cheap gas prices and not going to war with countries for no reason. Like, what the fuck are you resisting? But and it's funny how like the whole the bodily autonomy argument got turned on its head too. And I think they're just trying to confuse everybody, and they're doing a damn good job of it. But you have a year and a half of like, you got to get this vaccine and violate your bodily autonomy. But we're going to lose our shit when they put it back to the states and have states' rights decide whether you can abort your child or not.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. And
that doesn't stop them from doing mental gymnastics. They're like, oh, I totally believe in bodily autonomy, except for this vaccine because you are endangering me. But it's like, well, the vaccine doesn't stop transmission or infection. I don't care. Get it. Like, stop resisting. Stop resisting. This is the classic. Like, you watch these police abuse videos and the guy's like limping, like, stop resisting, and they break his arm. And that's what they're doing now. And we live in this world of like passive aggression. where one side is really good at being passive aggressive, and just like slowly chiseling away, but it's still aggression. And the other side gets pissed off and like, oh, that they're unhinged. They're passionate. They must be wrong because they're like lively. And I think people need to recognize that more, that like not all aggression is like in your face. Like a lot of it's very subtle. Most of it's lawyers. Most of it's like, it's jammed in a bill, 400 pages into it, and it's a couple sentences, and oh, by the way, now you can't have like a garden in your front yard. Now you have to have a garden. You can only have it in your backyard. That kind of stuff.
And like you said, it's baby steps. All these things are baby steps. We saw it during the COVID lockdown, where just like you give up a little bit, then they ask for a little more, then they ask for a little more, and it's
just 14 days to slow the spread. Come on, you can't say no to 14 days or 15 days. And that was the other thing. Was it 14 days? Was it 15 days? Nobody fucking knew. It was always like back and forth. And it was so funny. Like people like, that's never happening. They're not going to do any of this New World Order shit. But like any politician worth his salt is like saying, oh, we're in the New World Order. This is the New World Order. Like every prime minister and president and head of state. And then even in Connecticut, like they had a reopening committee. They're crooked as hell, so they put it under the purview of nonprofits, so you can have a FOIA request them. The governor handpicked the people that represented us, but like one is his wife's business partner, and one is his lifelong friend, and like we're just supposed to go along with it and like trust the experts. Like these people they're not even voted in. They're just like complete bureaucrats that are just appointed, and they're one's Rahm Emanuel's brother, Zeke Emanuel, who's like a eugenicist. He's like, I think the Atlantic says you shouldn't take medical care after the age of 75 because we can't afford it. We can't afford all these old people. But this is a guy who's crafting policy to save your life and protect you. It's like this, the same guy who says we have a population problem is going to give you the vaccine to save you and protect you. It's like, how dumb can you be? But people can be pretty dumb because they mostly went to public school, unfortunately.
Good point.
And that's the cycle. It's like a merry-go-round. Like, go get told what the authority says the thing to do, and then if you question it, you're the crazy one. Stop asking questions. Stop resisting.
So I know your family's probably wondering why you've been gone for 2 hours, but for people listening, so I'll let you go because I know it's getting late. We're both East Coast time. For people listening who want to keep up with your work, I know you say you post some of these videos. I know I see them on Facebook, but I believe they're also on YouTube also. Do you have a YouTube channel and all that stuff?
Yeah. The name of my YouTube channel is The Village Cry, or CT. So I live in Manchester, Connecticut. It's the city of Village Charm. And my YouTube channel is The Village Cry, or CT. And I came up with the name after the COVID lockdown went into effect. We actually had an incident with the police in my town where an individual ended up having a standoff and was shot and killed by the police. And all the town like Facebook groups on Facebook wouldn't allow any discussion on the shooting. So I created a forum called The Village Crier, from the city of Village Charm, on Facebook, and then I've just spun that off into the YouTube, The Village Crier CT, where I give commentary on town events. And anyone can do this. Like I'm operating off like of an app called this is like a AZR recording app on my cell phone, and I just play the video that the town releases on their website and record my screen, and I just post it. And then instead of like 20 people seeing the comment, you can have 300 to 1,200 people see the comment, and that's going to create a lot more interaction and a lot more dialogue in your town than if you just go and speak by yourself at a meeting and don't ever promote it. So the Village Crier CT on YouTube, and I have a photography website that hasn't been updated in a long time called tallboyadventures.com. It's a nickname, tallboyadventures.com. You can check me out there. Photography from all over the country, and hitchhiking trips and traveling around.
Awesome.
And thanks a lot for having me on, Ricky. Man, I've been listening to you a long time, and I have to update my credit card because I got hacked. And someone tried to buy $500 for the Tupperware in one day, so I canceled the card. But I got to get back on your Patreon and give you a few bucks a month.
Oh, thanks. You don't have to
You're
do
knocking
that.
it out, man. You got all these different projects, and I'm real proud of you, and I'm happy that it's happening for you. And we just got to keep speaking truth to power.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's it really, the thing is, like, I just uploaded. I'm so behind too. Like, I so wish this show could be my full-time gig, because I did a show earlier today right after work, and then went right into this one, and it's like nonstop, and I'm so behind. I don't have time to like record them and edit them and upload them as fast as I'd like. So it's like I got so many great conversations, including this one, that I want to get out ASAP, but because it's not my full-time gig and I take parenting.
Well, take a break. You don't have to release this conversation for a while. It's going to need some polishing.
No,
no pressure,
No,
you can only do what you can do, and you're doing it, though. You're doing it. Just chug along.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I'm really proud of, the audience I do have. I wish people, during 2020 and 2021, like, a lot of people were really generous. Just I would get PayPal donations from time to time. Patreon started kind of growing a little quicker, and all of a sudden it kind of slowed down a little bit, because I think a lot of the work that people like No Agenda, Del Bigtree, Last American Vagabond, Jason Burmis, Corbett, all these people who were willing to speak out, and my show also, during the hardest of times, to speak out. Because if we're talking about whatever, geopolitics or what's going on in our backyard, it wasn't offending everybody at once. But during the COVID lockdown, a lot of people didn't want to speak out because they didn't want to deal with the backlash, and they didn't want to, people were afraid, and everything was a heated argument, and people were home, so they had plenty of time to argue, and they had all this anxiety.
Hey, listen, this is a value for value show. So if you're listening right now, get on Ricky's Patreon and throw him a few bucks a month. And if a few hundred people do that every month, Ricky's going full time, and he's going to upload this episode so much quicker and not rant as much.
Well, I don't know if that's ever gonna stop, but
you're the man, Ricky.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I always appreciate the support from you, the whole Richard Grove family, and I call you guys a family because all you awesome guys that I met through Richard. Everybody's super nice. I remember when I went down there for, like, I think it was Richard's birthday or something like that, and it was roughly around the time that I released the Mickey Willis podcast when he came on, and I remember you guys were like, a bunch of people at the party were like, "Oh, Rick, the awesome podcast." So it's awesome. It's cool. Like, it's awesome to have listeners from other countries and other states, but when you actually meet people and you feel the the excitement.
Yeah, the meetup is super important. So, like, what I did during COVID, because I just felt it all coming down on our heads and everyone was spooked and they closed everything down, I just started having meetups with, like, neighbors or friends in town, and it just grown and built itself over time. So we try to get together monthly at one place or another, and sometimes we might have 20 guys there, and other times we might have 40. But that's something you can do that's purely social, of, like, spending your dollars with your friends who align with your views. If they have, like, a roofing company, hire them to do the roof. If they're a plumber, throw them some work if your neighbor's got a bad toilet or whatever. And that's another thing we can do as an individual, is vote with our dollars and build our own communities locally. And I'm amazed by the people I've met over the last year and a half. And I've been more social than ever and made more friends than ever, just by saying, like, what I don't agree with what's going on, and people are like, they vibe with that, and it's great. My homeschool my kids. I met a bunch more homeschooling families locally, and we have, like, a homeschooling co-op we work with, and we're also in, like, a PMA, which is a private membership association, which puts you out of the reach of the government. And that's what a lot of these, like, private clubs do. There's certain people that, are into that. My buddy, I'll just give him a plug, Aaron Bowman at Liberty House. He does work with PMAs, and he's been on, like, Ernie Hancock's show, I believe. But it's really cool what you can do within the law to kind of separate yourself from the state and just make those slow incremental steps, grow your own food, get a garden going, and just keep plugging along.
Yeah, but still, be involved, because I know during the COVID lockdown, a lot of people would talk about, like, I'm gonna go live in a cabin and grow my own food or whatever. But it's like, you can't ignore the government overreach and they'll come
for you no matter where you go.
Exactly.
It's just a matter of time.
Which is
so.
It's nice.
I'm not saying don't go for greener pastures if it's really affecting your mental health, but if you're in a community and you've been there for a while, it's best to kind of try to stay where you are, I think, and work with the community you've been building up for years on end, because you can't just go replicate that if you move halfway across the country. You're like, oh, I have plenty of friends like, I'm gonna move to Florida, and then they've moved to Florida and they're like, it's all right, but like I don't have hardly any friends here and I'm trying to meet people and it's tough. So the grass can be greener, but don't let that stop you from realizing your blessings that are around you all the time. There's a lot to be thankful for too, not to be all doom and gloom. Let's end on a high note. We have our children, which we're teaching, the right ways and the truthful ways, and they're our future. And, in order to secure that, we have to stand up now and speak for them.
Without a doubt. I mean, that's definitely a lot of motivation now. Prior to having kids, I was already motivated, but now thinking about their future, it's without a doubt. And have those conversations with your kids. Be as influential as you can. I can't talk today. Or sometimes I don't know if I'm mentally fatigued today because it's been a long day, or if the foreigner just comes out from time to time. But
it's the rain.
Maybe it's the rain. The sun. I'll
finally
tell you.
Got some rain in New England.
Yeah. But I do have more energy when it's sunny out and it's a nice day. But yeah, without a doubt, you have to be involved and talk to your kids. And like Carrie McDonald, who was on my show in 2019, she wrote the book Unschooled. That idea was something that not a lot of people were intrigued with at the time, but now they're much more interested in the idea of like maybe talking to your kids, maybe unschooling them, because there might be some ideas that you might want to remove from their brain, or at least discuss with them and make sure that people aren't trying to get in their consciousness and force feed them their own perspectives and ideologies. So be as involved as possible and be a part of your kid's upbringing. It's not the state's job to talk to your kid about any of those personal issues that they're trying to get involved with. And in many cases, like we discussed before, they're not even trying to help kids who are sparking these conversations or might have these doubts about who they are or their identity. They're trying to take kids who aren't confused and confuse them, and that's a whole different thing. So, but
it's a wild world, man. But stay wild.
Yeah, without a doubt. But thank you so much, Colin. Send me those links once you get a chance. No rush, because I think I'm just 3 episodes behind for releasing. But whenever you get a chance, send me those links to your YouTube channel and anything else, any other social media accounts or platforms you're on. Send me all the links. I'll put them in the show description, and hopefully we'll talk again in the near future. And keep up all the great work, man. You're very courageous, and we need more people like you who are out there talking, sparking conversation, coming to these meetings, and probably starting. I say probably, but most likely also starting your own Ripple, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who end up watching those meetings or watching those videos after they're clipped and posted. That you're helping open their minds to what's really going on.
Right on, Ricky. Thanks so much for having me. Take care and keep talking.
Thanks, Colin. Have a great night.
All right. God bless.
Yep. Bye.